Medieval warfare was never just about castles and kings. It was defined by the warriors who fought in brutal, unforgiving battles. Different regions developed their own fearsome classes of fighters, each bringing unique skills, weapons, and tactics that could shatter armies and terrify opponents. From wild shock troops to disciplined professional guards and even war beasts, these warriors turned the Middle Ages into one of the most frightening eras of conflict in history. Number 1. The fearsome berserkers. In the brutal landscape of Northern Europe during the early Middle Ages, one class of warriors stood out from the rest, not because of their armor or discipline, but because of the sheer terror they inspired. These were the berserkers, legendary Norse fighters whose very name has come down to us as a synonym for uncontrollable rage. Unlike the armored knights of Western Europe, who wrapped themselves in layers of mail and plate, berserkers often went into battle nearly naked, or clad in animal pelts. Wolfskins and bearskins were especially common. The word berserker itself is usually interpreted as bear shirt or bear shirt, both suggesting men who abandoned normal protection and fought in a state of frenzy that seemed supernatural to those who faced them. Chroniclers from medieval Scandinavia and later Christian writers left vivid, if sometimes exaggerated, descriptions. They wrote of men who bit their shields, howled like wolves, and rushed into combat with no thought for their own safety. Some sagas describe them as having the strength of many men, capable of breaking shields with a single swing of their heavy axes. Archaeological studies on Viking skeletons have shown physical changes in their bones-curved spines and enlarged arm muscles, consistent with years of drawing massive bows or wielding heavy weapons. Such evidence suggests that the training of a berserker was as punishing as the myths describe. The daily life of a berserker likely mixed practical martial preparation with ritual practices. From boyhood, young men were expected to master weapons, but berserkers seemed to go further, seeking altered states of consciousness before combat. Some accounts hint at the use of intoxicating drinks or psychoactive plants, while others point toward religious or shamanic rituals designed to put them into a trance-like fury. Whether through chemicals, chanting, or sheer psychological conditioning, the result was the same. Warriors who could endure wounds that would drop most men and who fought with reckless abandon. In battle, their role was usually to form the front line. When Viking armies struck across the North Sea into Anglo-Saxon England, or down the rivers into Francia, berserkers were often the first to charge. Their howls carried across the field, sending shivers through defenders who had never seen anything like them. A knight or levy soldier trained to hold a shield wall suddenly faced an opponent who wanted to die in the fight, whose body seemed immune to fear and pain. This unpredictability mattered as much as the actual killing power. A disciplined line could falter when confronted with a wave of screaming men in animal skins swinging enormous axes. Panic spread quickly, and once the line broke, the disciplined Viking warriors behind the berserkers surged in to exploit the chaos. Psychologically, the horror was immense. In medieval Europe, where warfare often followed certain rituals and codes, the berserkers embodied everything outside that order. They represented the wild, untamed forces of nature, crashing into the carefully structured world of castles, feudal obligations, and Christian ritual. When a small village in England, or a Frankish hamlet, heard the distant roar of berserkers on a raid, many fled without resistance, abandoning homes and fields. Even large armies often hesitated to face them directly. What makes the berserkers one of the most frightening warrior classes of the medieval period is not just the damage they inflicted, but the aura they carried. On the battlefield, fear kills as effectively as steel. A man who believes his opponent cannot be stopped is already halfway defeated. The berserkers knew this instinctively, and whether or not every tale about them was true, their reputation alone was enough to spread panic before the first clash of steel. In an age when courage and order were prized, they shattered those expectations, making medieval battles feel less like wars between men and more like encounters with forces beyond human control. Number 2, the Mongol horse archers. Across the vast grasslands of Central Asia emerged a warrior class that terrified medieval armies from China to Europe. The Mongol horse archers. Unlike the armored knights of the West, who relied on heavy cavalry charges, the Mongols built their entire military identity around speed, mobility, and precision archery. Children in the steppe began riding almost as soon as they could walk, and their bows were an extension of their bodies. By the age of 13, a boy could shoot accurately while standing on a galloping pony, twist in the saddle, and loose arrows behind him with uncanny precision. This skill, combined with a way of life that demanded constant riding and hunting, made Mongol horsemen uniquely suited for campaigns that stretched over vast distances. The weapon that defined them was the composite bow. Made of layered wood, horn, and sinew glued together under pressure, it packed enormous power into a compact frame that could be easily handled from horseback. It outranged the European longbow and could punch through armor at distances of 100 to 200 meters. Each rider carried multiple bows and several quivers of arrows, ensuring that a Mongol unit could unleash a storm of projectiles in continuous waves. The effect on enemies was devastating. Armies were harassed long before they could even see the riders clearly, and every step forward was met with a new barrage. But their true terror lay not just in the weapon, but in their tactics. The Mongols mastered the feigned retreat, a maneuver that exploited the psychology of medieval opponents. When a Mongol unit appeared to break and flee, European knights or Persian cavalry often chased after them in excitement, abandoning their formations in the process. At the right moment, hidden riders would swing in from the flanks, surrounding the pursuers and cutting them down. This tactic shattered some of the best armies of the medieval world, from the Hungarian host at the Battle of Mohi in 1241 to the Russian forces at the Battle of the Kalka River. Life for a horse archer was Spartan, but rigorously organized. Every man was expected to maintain several horses, rotate them to preserve strength, and survive off mare's milk, or even blood taken from their mounts during long campaigns. This allowed Mongol armies to cover astonishing distances, sometimes over 100 miles in a single day, leaving defenders bewildered at how quickly enemies could appear at their gates. A castle that thought itself safe behind walls could wake to find hundreds of horsemen circling outside, cutting off water supplies and burning fields before a siege had even begun. The fear they generated was as much psychological as physical. To medieval infantry, used to seeing cavalry charges they could at least prepare for, the Mongols seemed untouchable. Their constant movement meant there was no clear line to hold against, no moment of rest, no easy way to strike back. Soldiers reported being harried for days, never allowed to sleep, their morale collapsing under the endless rain of arrows. This combination of endurance, discipline, and psychological warfare made the Mongol horse archers one of the most horrifying warrior classes of the Middle Ages, and their legacy still shapes how military historians think about mobility and shock tactics today. Number 3. The Janissaries. Among the many warrior groups that defined medieval warfare, the Janissaries of the Ottoman Empire stood apart as a unique phenomenon. They were not born into noble houses, nor were they ordinary peasants called up for seasonal campaigns. Instead, they emerged from a system called the devshirme, in which Christian boys from the Balkans and other conquered territories were taken from their families, converted to Islam, and raised to serve the Sultan directly. This practice created a class of soldiers who owed no loyalty to local lords or kinship networks, but were bound entirely to the Ottoman ruler. Over time, the Janissaries became one of the earliest examples of a professional standing army in medieval Eurasia. Their training was relentless. From a young age,